Hello wonderful people, it's Dev here once again, and in today's video we are going to learn about how to bootstrap a project with the Cookiecutter Django. Okay, so a Cookiecutter is a command line utility that creates a project from a Cookiecutter, which is a project template. Okay, so the Cookiecutter Django is a template, and you are going to use a package called Cookiecutter to use this template to bootstrap a Django project. Okay, so let's jump into it and see how you are going to go about it. So first, navigate to the directory where you are going to create the project at. Then start a terminal session. All right. So the first thing you're supposed to do is to start a virtual environment. So virtual env, then env. All right, so a virtual environment has been created for us. So let's use it. Okay, so it's source env bin/activate. All right, so you can see our virtual environment has been activated. All right, so if you are on Windows, the command is going to be env /scripts and activate bin/activate. Yeah, something like this. I'm going to put the command inside the description below, so don't worry about it. Okay, so the first thing you're supposed to do is that you are supposed to have the Cookiecutter itself, the package on your computer or inside your virtual environment. So the first thing you're going to do is pip install the Cookiecutter. Okay guys, so the Cookiecutter package has been installed on our computer now. So to start a project with the Django Cookiecutter template, or the Cookiecutter Django template, so first come to their documentation and go to this place, getting started and running locally. All right, we are going to get this command here. All right, you are supposed to do it the first time you have installed Cookiecutter on your computer, or the first time you are using the Cookiecutter Django template. All right, so I'm going to leave the command inside the description below. Let's clear our terminal, and now let's run the command here. All right, it's going to ask us some few questions, and we are going to provide answers to it. Okay, you can see I've already downloaded it already, so that's why it is asking me whether they should re-download it again. So I'll just choose yes. All right, so you see that they've started asking me some few questions about the project that I want to bootstrap. First is the project name, so we are going to give it a project name of OMDB API. All right, they want a slug, so we are going to leave it as the default, and the description to a movie API clone. Then the author, you change it to your name, Dev. The next thing is the domain. If you have a domain, you can put it there. The next thing is your email. You can provide it too. The next thing is the version, which we can use the default. The next thing is the open source license. We are going to also use the default, which is MIT. And the time zone, you use the default too. So whenever you want to use the default, just press enter, check the option that has been selected as the default. In this case it was 1. And here, are you using a Windows machine? If it is, the default is no. If it is true that you are using a Windows machine, then you have to enter Y. But if in my case I'm using a Linux computer, so I'll just continue with the default. Will you use PyCharm? I will use VS Code, so I'll go on with the default. Will you use Docker? I'll also go on with the default. And the Postgres version or the PostgreSQL version is also important. So if you are going to use the latest one there, depending on the version that you are going to use, then you choose that particular version with the numbers option that has been provided here. Okay, I'm going to use the latest version, so I go with the default, select a tax, a JS tax runner. So you are not going to use any JavaScript tax runner, so you go with the default, and select the cloud provider that you are going to use. The cloud provider is where you are going to hold your static files. Okay, so in this project you are not going to save any static files, so we are going to go with none, which is 3. All right, let's select your mail service. Okay, you are not going to use any mail service for this project too, so depending on your project, you choose the mail service that suits you. Okay, so you are going to go with 9 as our option of choice. Are you going to use async? It is just an API, so if you are creating something like a chat app, then you should consider using Y here, or where you are going to use the async functions in Django or Python, then you are supposed to use Y. But in our case, we go with the default. Are we going to use Django REST framework? Which is yes. Okay, are we going to use a custom bootstrap compilation? No, default. Use compressor. The compressor is going to use Django compressor, which in our case we won't use. Are we going to use Celery? No. Are we going to use Mailhorn? No. Mailhorn is going to help us debug our emails or debug our email configuration whilst we are in development. Are we going to use Sentry? No. Sentry is a login functionality, or it's a login website. Okay, so are we going to use white noise? Yes, because we will use Heroku. Use Heroku? Yes, because we will deploy our application to Heroku. And are we going to use any CI tool? No, none, so we go with the default. Do you want to keep the local.env file in the version control, which is very important when you are working in teams, so you are going to go with yes. And debug should be on or false, so we are going to go with the default. Okay, so it tells us that you chose no, so you are not going to use any stats, so it's not a big problem. And it says success, project initialize, keep up the good work. Okay, so now let's check our directory ls. So you can see we have the omdb underscore API here, so let's cd into it. Let me first clear the terminal. Let's cd into it, omdb. Okay, now let's open it in the Visual Studio Code. All right. Okay guys, so I'm going to use some few minutes to explain the file structure here. So you can see that it comes with some gigantuous amount of files, which makes you think as if you made a mistake using the Django Cookiecutter, but it's really good to use this project. It makes deploying of your application very simple. Okay, so I'll take some time and explain the project structure here. All right, so first we start with the config here, or let's start with the .env here. So we said when we were doing the configuration, we said this one should be kept in the inside the version control source. Okay, so when you come here and you click on the .django file here, you can see it's setting some variables. Let me open the production one. That one is has more variables. Okay, you can see it's setting some variables that Django is going to use, something like the Django settings module, the Django secret key, which are needed to run your Django application. All right, so that's what the .env contains. Okay, let's go to the config. Okay, the config is like the root project itself. If you use Django admin start project, then the project name, that's where your config, the root project or the root settings of your Django project are kept. But in this way, it is done in a very nice way. So you can see you have settings for a settings folder here. So inside the settings folder, we have a base, you have a local, and you have a production. So the base is what is going to be available in all the projects, in all phases of the project. So either you are running inside a local development or you are going to production, this base file is going to be used, or this base settings that has been made here is going to be used. So if you are using, if debug is turned on, you are going to use this settings.py file. This settings.py file, this local.py file is going to be used, all right, with the settings that has been declared inside. All right, with the setting that has been declared inside. All right, okay, so if you are going into production where debug has been turned to false, then it is going to use the production.py file to handle your settings of your Django project. Okay, so this is it. So that is all for this settings folder. Let me close it. So when you come here, because we chose that we will use Django REST API, it has given us an API underscore routed py files. Okay, let me open it and show you what is inside. Okay, so inside it you can see that it's making some initial routers for an API. Okay, so this is where the routers of your API are going to be stored for your project. You can also externalize it to the application that is going to run the API and also include it inside the URLs pattern. All right. Okay, so inside the urls.py file is where our root URLs are going to be, So this is it. Okay, so that is basically all for the config folder. Okay, the next important folder is this guy here, the omdb underscore API. Okay, so it contains some important files. First, the static, which has been grouped, so you can put the required file or the file that meets the specification inside the proper folder. If it's a CSS, it goes here. It's a font, it goes here. It's an image, it goes here. All right, and here is where our templates will go. And you can see we have some initial templates already. One for the accounts. This one is coming from Django All Auth and some other packages that has been installed by the Cookiecutter Django. Okay, so you can see we have another folder here, user. Okay, so everything pertaining to our user model is inside this folder. It's inside this folder. So we can just go inside and let's go to the model. So you can see we have a user model here that is inheriting from the abstract user, and it makes some changes here, making it a custom user field. All right. Okay, and the last thing is this requirement. Yeah, the requirement contains similar to the settings folder. It has a base, it has a local, it has a production.txt. So depending on the whether debug is turned on or off, then you are supposed to use this one of this, but this one is going to be used no matter what for the project. Okay, so for us to be able to run our project, first we have to install the required packages for the project to be able to run. Okay, and we have to do one last setting, which is that we are supposed to create a .env file or export some variables to our terminal, which is the database URL and the Django read.env file. Okay, so you set the Django read.env file when you want to use a .env file. So by default it is turned to false. Okay, but the database URL is required. All right, so we want to use a .env file so that our work will be able to be reproduced simply. So first let's create a .env file in the root configuration, in the root folder, so .env. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is export Django underscore read dot env file, all right, equals to true. All right, capital T, true. And the next thing we are going to do is to export the database URL. Database underscore URL. All right. Okay, so here we are using Postgres, so it's going to be Postgres / and the database DB user. So where I'm putting the DB user, you put the database user there. Sorry about this. You put the database user name here, then you provide the user's password. All right, and the next thing is at 127.0.0.1 localhost, that is localhost, then / the database name, DB name. All right, so this is how it is going to be like. No, please do not add the signs here, just fill in the database name here and the database the user's password and the DB or the DB table's name here. All right, okay, so this is what you need to be able to for for us to be able to run the project. Okay, so you save it. Okay, all right, so now let's go into our terminal and start our let's run our project. All right. Okay guys, so we are going to start our project by first sourcing in our .env file. Okay, so we are going to run our project with python manage.py run server. Okay, so guys, you remember I told you that the project relies on some dependencies for it to be able to work, and we forgot to install them. So let's clear our terminal and install that as soon as possible. Okay, so it's going to be pip install -r, then it's going to be requirements slash, and we are in local production, so local.txt. It's going to take some time to do the installation. Okay guys, so the packages or the dependencies has been installed. Okay, so let's clear our terminal and run python manage.py run server. All right. Okay, so you can see our server is now running. It's asking for migrations, which you can run simply with python manage.py migrate. So let's just open the project and let's see how it looks like. Okay, so you can see we have this nice template that is coming from the templates folder that I showed you in the previous section, or just previously. Okay, so you have this nice navbar, and you have the Django debug tool working nicely over here for us too. All right, so this is basically all how to bootstrap your project with the Cookiecutter Django template. Guys, if you like what I'm doing, if you like my videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Give a thumbs up by liking this video and commenting below inside the comment section. I really appreciate this, and thank you for spending your time with me. Until then, it's bye bye.